Good afternoon. This is Animal Uncontrol. Welcome to the voice chat. These calls are recorded for uploading to social media, and by joining a call, you're consenting to being recorded. Anyone wishing to join a call should email me at animaluncontrol@gmail.com, and I will reply with instructions. Today's topics: Mick Invasion game walkthrough, a few remarks on civic action, and participation in the forum, and potpourri. I know some of the folks are on, let's see, I think Sheepie, I wanted to talk to you about what's going on by you. I know there's been some things coming up in the Discord. First, I want to, pursuant to, I guess it was it last week or the week before, it was last week, I had Chef and Reichert were on, and they showed some video game development relevant to the space, and I came up with something also. I want to see if I can share by looking at yourself. So I took a Python programming course a few years ago, and one of the class exercises was to develop a Space Invaders type game in Python, not necessarily to create a arcade quality game, just to, sort of illustrate, basically learn how to code in Python, pretty class-based, programming paradigms. So this is what, I think you folks can see this. This is what the game looked like. And again, this is a low effort result. You can produce, arcade quality games in this framework, but that's a, high effort, activity. So I believe, which one am I in? Okay, so this is the way the game is supposed to work. You can run this from, if you folks can see this, do you see this white screen with all these green spaceships on it? Can you folks see that? Folks still there? Is everybody on mute? I don't hear anybody.
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it. Okay. So this is pretty rudimentary stuff. So, if you hit the play button and, you have your spaceship, you can shoot these things and it keeps score. So I had the thought the other week that, see, these green spaceships, it's just a bitmap, right? So you can replace this with anything. So I'll quit out of that. So I had the thought, I said, okay, what if I just replace the spaceships with a picture of Mick the Mauler? Mick the Mauler was a celebrity mauler from the last decade. I probably wrote a dozen blog articles about him. So I said, all right, I'm just going to do that. So if you look at what I have here, this is the game package. These are all the different files. So like, for example, the alien, right? If I click on that, open it up, so you can see that's the alien spaceship. So what I did was I just created another version where in this other package, the alien is actually Mickey, right? It's Mick the Mauler. So I said, all right, I'll swap that in. So now I have a Mick Invaders game. So if I run this, am I in the right directory? Hold on. Yeah, I'm in the right directory. Okay, so if I run this run this, right? So now instead of the spaceship, now I have all these Mick the Maulers. So I can, hit the play button, and now I'm shooting him. See? But with some effort, this could be turned into something really cool. You had sound effects, better graphics. It would be funny as hell. So yeah, so you get points for shooting, and we don't want to wait too long because they'll come down and then they'll kill you. So this is the Mick Invaders walkthrough. Coming to an arcade near you.
I would play that game. I love that.
I mean, too, is getting it. I could package this up, but we could, do a lot more. That again, the idea of this was it's coursework. It just basically to teach, learn how to program in Python. So, but you can do a lot in this framework. I'm getting some background noise.
Yeah, that's me. I wanted to say something. So I'm a programmer myself, and I've come across a lot of stuff that I think could, a specific thing. So there's the possibility of compiling Python to WASM and then running that in a web browser. So you could make this.
Do it. Yeah, you could even package it up into just making it, native executable and just drop it someplace.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that someone has to actually get the file onto their computer, and some people don't want to do that. Whereas if it's available in the web browser, you open the page and it's running immediately.
Yeah. One thing we were talking about, because I'm a programmer also, although I'm kind of new to this. I've been doing actually a lot of Python the past couple of years, and you're right. There's all different ways to, deploy something like this. One thing I wanted to do was actually create a custom website. One of the, tabs would be where you could access, something like this. It would be really cool to develop sort of a new school, game where, there's like almost like a first person shooter type game, for example. You could probably do that in this framework also, because, it probably wouldn't be as good as maybe some of the, games developed in, say, compiled languages, but it would be interesting. But anyway, I'm going to quit out of that. So, yeah, so that's Mick Invaders. The other topic I wanted to talk about was, I've started like another push for to get the ADA revised, and there's some talk about that on the Discord, and actually what I'm doing now is I'm trying to push. I'm going to lean on my state officials to push it up the food chain. One of the rationales being that, it's a self-rule violation. I mean, it's not the worst thing about it. I didn't make a big deal about that at the beginning because, like, for example, if you're in the grocery store and you get attacked by a fake service dog, whether that's enabled by federal laws or state laws probably isn't that important to you. It's not the worst thing about it, but it is an important issue because one problem with that was that those ADA service, I say service animal, but it's really dogs, although there's some exception for miniature horses. But personally, I have never seen a miniature horse service animal ever. Has anyone else? It seems like it's always a dog.
The only context I've ever seen horses being used for something like that is at an actual ranch where people take like, their children or something too and like ride for, but yeah, never like in public. I've never ever seen like a miniature horse anywhere in public.
Right, being passed off as a service animal, right? Like in Walmart, for example. Yeah, I haven't seen that either. I mean, service animals, I mean, if you have a farm or a ranch, you can have horses, you can have full-size horses if you want, but I'm thinking, like in McDonald's, I mean, there's always a dog, which sort of, highlights the point that this is a dog issue. It's not really a pet issue or an animal issue. But I want folks to, consider civic action. Now, I put the draft letters out there, or letter, and I'll link to that in the description of this video. And if folks want to revise it, because I know I've been talking to some folks in the background and saying, well, maybe you should emphasize this or emphasize that. And like, look, you're putting your name on it. So, if you want to tweak it, fine. I mean, if you want to write one from scratch, that's fine too. It's like, I just put it out there as something for people to work off of, for folks who perhaps don't articulate themselves the best in writing, for example. It's like, okay, just, paste it into WordPad, change your name, change the name of your senator, and boom, send it out. And, it's a pretty small ask, and particularly folks in the Discord. I'd really appreciate if you would do that, because you never know when one of these things is going to ring the bell. Maybe my congressman doesn't care, but yours might. And it only takes, one representative to, to sponsor a bill. So, I think in the more people, because, the point somebody was making was, well, if I send this in, it doesn't matter. But, but if everybody does, perhaps it will. Like all those small probabilities add up. You can think of it as, buying a lottery ticket. Somebody's going to hit it sooner or later. So I'd like folks to do that, because I know there was some heated debate a few days ago. And actually, I gave myself I gave myself a 48-hour timeout. Or actually, not only was I not in the Discord, I wasn't in the space at all. I didn't go to the blog. I didn't check the Animal on Control email. I didn't go onto the Reds. I didn't check dogsbite.org. I didn't do any of that. Because I just sort of needed a break from this. Because I was wondering, like, why was I so upset? So, and I think what it was it's like, look, I provide, this space, and I don't necessarily think of everybody else in it as my minions, but if I say, hey, I would like a small favor, just print this thing off and send it in. And maybe it won't accomplish anything, but maybe it will, right? Just do it as a favor to me, for example, right? That's a point I'm trying to make. And I think, as this moves forward, I think at some point I'd like to make this more organized, like actually make it a real activist organization and or lobbying group, in which case it's like, yeah, I'm going to, expect people to, if you want to be involved in this, to maybe do something, pull one for the team or put one in for the team every once in a while. That's the point I'm trying to make. Because when somebody doesn't, particularly if it's just a small ask, like I'm not going to say, hey, look, I need you to drive a truckload of TNT into the, the SPCA headquarters. But I say, hey, you know what? Send this letter in, unless there's a good reason not to, like maybe you don't want to expose yourself or whatever. And if you want to, make revisions, fine. Because maybe some of us have different perspectives on this, and that actually makes it more interesting. But it's to say, well, that'll never work. That's impossible. That's a waste of time. You don't know what you're doing. It's really sort of, well, it's disrespectful of me, and I don't appreciate that. And I think that doomer talk is actually one reason why there's so little progress in this space. I've seen that quite a bit back in my blogging days, where I'd say, okay, everybody's complaining about this stuff, dog attacks, dog noise pollution, fake service dogs, et cetera, but the reason that our opposition always gets what they want, or usually does, is because really there's no opposition to it, no opposition to them. Right, like they agitate, they do things like this. They do this letter writing campaigns, lobbying, petitions, and so forth. They do those things to get what they want. And one reason that this is sort of not a partisan political issue particularly, or why all our representatives are overwhelmingly pro-dog, is because they never hear from anybody except the dog people. So I think it would be helpful to, start to say, okay, let's start to push back. We want something, like we want this, and this service dog thing, it's a pretty small ask. And I think it's a good place to get started, because particularly the last few weeks, it's become apparent, at least apparent to me, that fake service dogs are like really unpopular. Even a lot of dog people don't like it, right? Nobody wants a big steaming pile of dog shit in the frozen food section, right? so just something for folks to think about. Who else do we got on the call? We got Let's see. Oh, Johnson's on. What's up?
Hey, what's going on? It's been a minute.
Yeah, we're just talking about civic action and the like. So I gave you, probably missed the demo of the Mick Invasion game, but you can rewind and watch it later. So those are the remarks I wanted to make, but I want to talk to a few of you folks. I think, Johnson, you said you had some stuff to share, so I could give, and Sheepie probably does also. So I could, did you want to take the mic and talk, or up to Johnson? I mean, do you want to take the mic for 10 minutes and talk?
Yeah, sure. I've been going hard. You guys have inspired me to actually start going after some reporters. And I emailed this one Indian lady who was talking about how the culling of dogs and how they're so helpful in India and how they wanted to save them and everything. And I lit her up. I lit her up with statistics. I lit her up with facts. I have not heard from her. But the young gentleman, James from the United States, he said I could use his name. He wrote an article. I don't remember who posted it. I don't know if it was Chef or yourself or IHD or somebody posted it. And he had wrote about like how it was like people didn't like dogs and the reasons for it. And I read the article and lit him up. I was like, dude, that's totally incorrect. And I gave him the facts and lit him up. He actually responded back to me. And he's actually a really nice guy. But I think what it is he's still an industry dude. And I can share with you what we wrote. Let me open it up.
Well, what I'd be interested, like what he said, okay, supposedly, like, I guess he reads our minds. Why do people hate dogs according to him?
Now, what he wrote initially was, it was just really kind of silly. It was just like, we don't like them because they smell, or because they bark too much, or because they lick us too much, or some other things like that. And I won't go into what I fully sent him, but the facts I put in was, number one, I said, allow me to elaborate. And as that was the first one. And I said, number one, I said the entitled mutt owners and who they believe the mutt would never bite anybody is absurd. And I think I posted this on IHD's too, because I think it was IHD who did it. So I posted the whole letter there. Number two was the mutt owners willing to like bring their nasty, unclean beast everywhere the public wants them or not, and how they think that's acceptable. Number three, obviously, is barking. I mean, it's an alarm that's going off all the time. It drives us crazy. Four, statistics. I said something nutters never go by. 5, where has Caesar been? And I put, he's been in court because he's been dealing with his free roam pit bull that I told you guys about, attacked Queen Latifah's wife, USA black gymnast, and then a couple other people just went nuts. And that's why he hasn't been seen, because he's tied up in litigations right now. And my mother used to work for the Los Angeles DA's office. And that's where I got the information from. So excuse me if I drop a plug. And number six, just the sheer number of pit bulls running around in shelters. I said, if they're also such a wonderful beast, why are they overrunning the shelters? So his response was, and it's really kind of short, so I'll read it. Hello, Mr. Johnson. I received and read your email. I want to thank you for bringing these issues to my attention. Honestly, I have not conducted any research on dog bites yet, so I've opened someone's eyes. But after reading your email, I decided to take a challenge to research Animal One Control, I Hate Dogs, War on Dogs, as you suggested, and write unique articles based on the facts. I am an open-minded person who does not view non-dog lovers as horrible human beings. I recently published an article on the top reasons cited by people who hate dogs, which I read so far and I still don't like, but I will talk to him about that. You can take a look at it and let me know what you think, or even tell me what your reasons are so I can include them in the article. Because I can, I'm going to stop it there. And he's just like, I'm going to make you a friend. And he sends his love. So at least he opens his eyes to the rationalization that there's people out here that don't like dogs for various reasons, such as these, which are maulings, children attacks, the senseless barking, the crapping everywhere, the whole world is a toilet, and people thinking that they need to be everywhere, which, and I caught the last part of your, in spaces like restaurants and stores, which we're trying to fight so hard to get them out of.
Yep. Yeah, and those are good points. I mean, those are all excellent points. But I think what people like that need to realize is that, for those reasons, like most of us are here, of all of us really, typically for very personal reasons, because they were subject to bad outcomes involving dogs, dog people, dog culture, right? Because even if you look at for example, the incident related, it wasn't last time, it was the time before, was, why I'm no longer a hike leader, because of, dog people bringing their dogs on hikes. But it wasn't that I just hated dogs, like I just can't stand having them around. What I can't stand is having dog people, break all the rules, dismiss activity leader advice, and do it in a really blatant and obnoxious way, and cause bad outcome. Because actually what happened that one time was a dog was injured. I told him, don't turn your dog loose in the woods. And he was like, proverbially, he's like, hey, fuck you. And the dog got injured. But it really had nothing to do with a hatred of the animal necessarily. What I took issue with primarily was the really noxious, overly entitled attitude of the dog owner. Really, that was the issue. Because if he had his dog under control the whole time, there wouldn't have been a problem. But he had to bring his dog and create a problem. That really was the issue. Yeah, if you go back, it wasn't last time; it was the time before. But
oh no, I listened to him. Yeah, and I was laughing because I thought your story was so hilarious when you lit them up.
Oh yeah, that was one of my. That was one of my most epic rants, Well, a lot of it, Del, too, is that why we want changes, and actually, why we want particularly state intervention is that, often, or the attitude is that, well, dog people, it's not just the dogs are great, but dog people are really great people. Oh yeah, they're totally reasonable, and they're very civil, and they're of the utmost moral character. And that is just completely wrong. They're the most just overly entitled, belligerent, aggressive, just defiant people around. And people like that really need to be dealt with by the state. In other words, you can't just say, okay, like if you got a neighborhood dog problem, you just can't say, well, it's just a bunch of neighbors that don't get along, they need to work it out. And it's like, no, you have somebody creating a nuisance and they're injuring people in the process, right? And that the state has an interest in, maintaining order. And that's what needs officer friendly needs to square these things away. That's the solution, because leaving us on our own to deal with these people, it just doesn't work out, because what you would have to do is you'd have to remove pretty much all legal protections. In other words, the government would just have to completely go away. And it's like, sir, if you want to, settle it that way, if you want gunfight at the OK Corral type solution, it's like, okay, but this is a matter for the state. This is a real basic law and order issue. And the thing is, the dog people are allowed to just, trample the rights of others. The animals themselves, and this is just me speaking personally, if other folks on the call or listeners, if you just hate the animals themselves with a passion, I totally respect that, 100%. But personally, I don't find the animals themselves that interesting. Mostly, it's their two-legged enablers are really where what I find objectionable. So it might be interesting, if I spoke to that person also, or if they just listen to this recording. So,
Well, I want to send my shout out to everyone on the call. I do apologize for not saying that first and foremost. For me, I think that since the dog has now overseeded the ambitions of their owners, I put them on the same pedestal of hate. I don't like either one.
yeah.
It used to be before, but it's like even when they're not interacting with anyone and they're just barking all the time, how could you not take that? Like that's
Yeah.
a constant racket.
Well, yeah, you hate the dog for what it does, and you hate the owner for enabling it. Yeah. Because nothing else is doing that, or nothing else that we allow into the community. You're not being, chirped out of your house by parakeets. You're not, you don't have packs of murdered guinea pigs, like, terrorizing the block. I got a problem too. It's like, now we got another one. It's like, and these things, the intervals are getting shorter. Like I said, every year and a half, 2 years, there'd be another neighborhood block war would erupt over dogs. But I've seen there's this big mastiff and a pit bull, and I've been seeing them at large quite frequently. The thing is, animal control won't do anything unless they've actually been on your property. And I've been checking the ring cams, and they have not been in my space. Which actually is BS. Really, an at-large dog anywhere should be an issue. But, they do as much as possible to avoid doing their jobs. We have that probably on the white pill is with my across the street neighbors. I have not seen or heard that dog in probably 2 weeks at least. I think they got rid of them. But the thing is, it's just a remission. They're probably, if that's the case, they're probably, or if they still have them, the dog's going to become a nuisance again at some point, or they're going to get another dog and that dog's going to be a nuisance, or they're going to move out and somebody's going to move in with a dog and that's going to be a nuisance. There's no end to this. It's just endless, battle.
Give it good energy. Try to give it good energy as hard as it is.
Yep. So, with that, maybe we'll transition to Sheepie. What's up with you and the 9 dogs across the street? I guess it is across the street. Right?
It's like it's like adjacent. It's not across the street. It's like the property lines are kind of weird. So they're like next to and in front of me, if that makes sense. With like a transmission line easement between us also.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, yeah. So it's just nonstop barking, and so my driveway is gravel. It's probably like 100 feet. It's really long. I'm not good at measuring distances without some sort of device, but it's a long driveway. So I walk down to get my mail, and at some point I get down the driveway and I'm like next to their fence, probably about 30 yards away, and the entire time that I'm outside, they bark ferociously. So like if they got out, if they were managed to escape their Jurassic Park level fencing, I would be dead. I would be like, they would eat me. Like, it's crazy. I realized I need to carry a weapon to check my mail at this point. If they were to ever escape, like and even with a gun, like I would probably have very little chance of success because there's like 9 of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like I need like a bat or like some type of like melee weapon and
need
like
a
a sidearm. I need a flamethrower, yes. And I've been looking for an excuse to get one.
Big clip.
So.
Yeah.
My concern with a gun is there's so many of them. They would like while I'm trying to like shoot one, they're gonna like surround me, and the instant one of them grabs my arm, it's over. You know what I mean? Like,
you could probably hope that maybe the gunfire might scare some of them off.
Shotgun,
the thing is,
that's just too much.
pit bulls are very,
Yeah.
very tenacious. Like sometimes they'll pursue an attack even after they've been shot. The good news
Right.
about other mutts, like if you're talking about say like German shepherds, probably even like a warning shot is enough to make them retreat. But or if you shoot them once, but yeah, there's documented cases of pit bulls being shot multiple times and pursuing the attack. But that's why they often they don't allow that many dogs in a community because of issues like that. And
Now that's
nine dogs is a pack, so they're going to behave more dangerously than
Exactly.
they would individually. Yeah.
and
That's
that's a
what
question
concerns
I
me.
have, Sheepy. Why do they have 9 dogs? Is that even legal?
So that is yet to be seen. I have not figured out yet whether they are breeders. Someone I posted about this anonymously in the local like Facebook page. I asked that question like is is there any limit to the number of dogs people can have here? And most of what I got in response was laughter and mockery.
Oh no.
A lot of the comments were literally things like go back to the city, like city slicker, like bring like don't bring your city mindset out here to the country. And I'm like, first of all, I'm from the country, like, and this area I'm in right now, I wouldn't even consider like true like country living. We're like half an hour from a major city, like, you know what I mean? We're outer city limits, first of
Yeah.
Yeah.
all.
Well, it's interesting. The this quote, "This is the country." That was one of the tiles on the barking dog bingo board
That's hilarious.
because
But
that's
yeah,
what they say is that. And the thing is, though, that doesn't matter because they can talk about the barking, whether it's barking or dog trespass or whatever. It's like you have a right to peaceful use of your space, regardless. It doesn't matter where you. So
right.
if they're noise polluting is noise polluting. It'd be one thing if it was some very remote area where everybody lived 3 miles apart, then I guess it wouldn't matter. But as you noted, yeah, people, it's not that. It's probably more semi-rural than that it's not like northern Alaska or the Yukon Territory or anything
I
like
know.
that.
It's just I don't know how to explain the mindset, but it's a weird form of elitism where it's like we're country folk and we just but but instead of like traditional values that you might associate with living in the country, so to speak, like respecting your neighbors
Yeah,
and helping each other, it's like this weird
Manners.
defiant sort of I do what I want
yeah,
type of mindset instead. So there was that. And then I did get a few helpful responses. One lady did post the actual I guess, what is it called? Regulations. And since we live in what's considered, I guess it's colloquially known as no man's land, we're like outside of the official city limits, but so we're governed by like the county
yeah.
law. And the county allows 20 dogs, but six, you can only have 6 cats, but you can have up to 20 dogs in the county. So they have a ways to go before they max out their limits here, unfortunately.
Yeah. But like I said too, they definitely created a private nuisance. Yeah, I don't know. I tell you, I hear you because it's a very difficult problem to solve, and particularly with the attitude these dog owners have. They're like, well, I can just do whatever I want. Well, can't you just do whatever you want? I mean, if they can project noise into your space, can't you project bullets into their space?
Right? Yeah. Well, I mean, this
I
is the
mean,
country, right?
because well,
We
yeah,
didn't
because
want bullets.
sound is a real thing. I mean, it's it can be quantified, it can be measured, it has a real effect on things, just like a bullet would. And it's a very, very real thing. And unfortunately, it's not treated that way.
Right.
They and one thing too is I don't know what they would do is they I mean, one thing they could do is block off the fence, like cover it, because it sounds like they're just barking at anything in their field of view that moves. So if they block the field of view, that would probably cut back on the barking.
Yeah, it seems to be, even if they, because like there, it's very heavily tree lined on almost on every side except like the side where that transmission line easement is, which, so when I walk past to my mailbox, they can see me for sure. But most of the rest of the time, it seems like even if they hear something, they just go off. Or maybe even for no reason at all, they seem to just go off sometimes.
Yeah, they just bark. Well, yeah, they're just converting dog food into noise.
Right. Well, and now I don't remember if I mentioned this last time. They have added like 5 or 6 ducks to their household. So they put another, which the fence area the ducks are in is way too small for the number of ducks, which is unfortunate. So these dogs have like almost it looks like almost an entire acre to run around in, but these poor ducks have maybe like a, I'm gonna say 6 by 6 foot cage max,
Oh,
which is not good. Yeah.
that's
And
not good. Yeah.
right. So these ducks are confined to this tiny area. And I'm thinking now the barking has ramped up because the dogs just, every time I go by, if the dogs aren't barking at me when I walk by, they're just like glued to the fence, the side of their fence that faces those ducks. And now, so they're just barking constantly, I think, because there's like 5 or 6 ducks right in front of them all day long.
Barking.
Well, on the
Barking at the
upside, they're more likely to get attacked by their owners than you. So you actually might get off by the law of averages here.
dogs.
I mean, honestly, because it seems like
Because
that
if it's
woman is home alone almost all
misdirected
the time.
aggression, yeah,
Right.
they're going to go after them.
I know. It's one lady that I see. It's like a husband and wife, but I've never met the husband so far. And every time I see anyone interacting with the dogs or the ducks, it's her only. And yeah, because we've seen cases like that, right? Where a woman goes to feed, like, I think it even happened with Great Danes not that long ago. That
Yep.
she goes to
Yep.
feed them and they just like maul her to death.
Yep.
Because they
So I
start
know.
fighting and she tries to break them up. It's always a fight and they try to break up the fight.
Right. And
Yep.
I wonder already if they've had aggression issues because like I mentioned, the fence, it's not even just one large area. There's cross-fenced areas. And I noticed that a couple of the pit bulls are kept in this separate area from like the rest of the pit bulls and Great Danes sometimes. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I would not step foot near that backyard with all
They've
those
got
dogs in there.
Great Danes and pit bulls.
There's 7 pit bulls, a Great Dane, and then a fat little wiener dog that does not seem to go into the yard with the pit bulls. I've only seen it in the
Yeah.
front yard, which is separate from that fence.
The pit bulls are like, yeah, I want sauerkraut on mine.
Right. And
I'm sick.
also the amount of flies, the amount of flies I have now at my property has increased. Like there's always flies in the summer, I get it. But like, there's like 9 dogs next door, and I really do think it's not just in my head. Like there's so many more flies now since they've moved in. It's just disgusting. I don't know if they clean the yard up. The other thing recently she's been doing is like just leaving water spraying like seemingly 24/7. Like almost every time I look over there, she has water like hoses spraying into the fencing and stuff, I guess to cool the dogs and stuff off. But so you've got this, God, I can't even imagine how disgusting it is if I were to get close to the yard with like dirt and like, these 8 large dogs and like water spraying and it's like 107 degrees outside. Like, can you imagine the smell?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, oh dog.
Oh my dog, that
Yeah.
smell.
And you know what it is too? Is like something like this because I can hear it because this is what it kind of turns into when something like this happens. Somebody moves in or somebody gets the dogs and they become a nuisance like this. Is that it kind of takes over your life because you keep like as a barking. Barking is a noise that. I may be going too far to say it's designed to, but it's an alarm. It's going to like draw your attention to it. So you're always looking over there, like what's going on, what's going on over there now. And sometimes it even gets to the point, even if you hear any sound, you're like, is that barking? Is that? Oh no, it was I don't know, a branch fell or something, or it's just some some house noise. It was the air conditioner cycling on. You think, is that a dog? So it kind of takes over your life. You almost become obsessed with it. And it's difficult not to, to not be, focused on it. It's really, it's just totally noxious. The whole situation is just really toxic.
Yeah, you're right actually, because that's been happening to me lately. Like, I have a garage gym that I like to work out in, and now I'll hear like the barking, and it's hard noise travels pretty far, so like, and they can be really loud, surprisingly loud. But so there's been a few times where I was like, oh my God, are they like right about to run into my garage? Like it sounded like they were close. Or yeah, like you said, I'd hear like some noise that was unidentifiable, and I'd be like, oh my God, has one of those dogs escaped? And it's like
Yep.
running up here now. You know what I mean? Like it really does put you, and a lot of dog owners are just people that haven't experienced this kind of thing, would probably scoff, and make fun of you for being like, oh, I'm on edge for my neighbor's dogs. But, I think coupled with the fact that I have had a traumatic experience with dogs, like, I still have some sheep, and it crosses my mind frequently that I'm going to look outside and see their bloody, ragged bodies like being dragged around again or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it sticks. I'm not trying to say I have like war, like a war veteran level of PTSD, but like honestly, it was very traumatic. It's a bloody,
No,
violent,
you're
traumatic
traumatized.
experience. Yeah, and I have kids, and I just imagine like, oh my God, like what if one of them, goes outside and like that one of these dogs are loose, or it's not a joke, and I don't really understand how people don't take it more seriously. I think it's just an ignorance of the actual like levels of violence that these animals can inflict and how quickly it can happen.
Yeah. Well, the thing with the barking is like people don't have. Oh, sorry.
Oh, my fault. Just real quick. You've said it before. Chef said it before. Sheepy, you've said it before. You guys are just forgetting that. It's just that everybody sees it as just dog. They don't think that it could do what it does. And so then all of a sudden you get these placid looks on their face. It's pretty sad.
Yeah, 100%.
Even with the barking, it's like, just barking itself turns your life into a living hell that you don't really appreciate until you've been through it. And that it's my observation from my experience, and many other people said the same thing. Like they say, like before, I never would have thought it could be like this, but after a while, once you've been subject to enough of it, it really does, it changes you, because it's a form of torment. I mean, noise is used as a torture method. It's been used, for a long time, perhaps even barking noises themselves, although I don't have a source on that, but it's used to like break people down psychologically. That happened. It was in 1989, I think, when, Manuel Noriega was the president of El Presidente of Panama. And the U.S. military essentially, invaded the country to unseat him. And he took refuge, and I think in the Vatican sanctuary. So the soldiers couldn't go after him. So the thought was, okay, what do we do? Like how can we, extract him? Because this standoff could go on forever. Not the Vatican. Well, maybe it was a Vatican embassy, I think. I mean, the Vatican itself is in Europe, but it was a Vatican embassy, I believe. And somebody could correct me on that, but it was some kind of sanctuary. So he took sanctuary. They couldn't, physically extract him. They couldn't bomb the building because it would have created an international incident. So, okay, how can we extract him? So the Army psychologist said we could, noise pollute him out of there. So they came up with these tapes, and I don't know if they had barking dog noises on them or not, but it had heavy metal music, jackhammers, chainsaws, various like really obnoxious, sounds. It has blasted that noise into his space 24/7, and it got him to surrender. He's like, finally, like, I can't take it anymore. And he came out. worked. So, but that's what it does is noise like that will, break you down psychologically. And I think it may never recover from it either,
That is a really, really interesting point. And just to add to that, I studied electrical engineering, and one of my kind of like passing interests or casual interests was like cymatics. And I think probably most of you are familiar with the concept of the way that vibrations or waves can interact with physical matter. Like you may have seen, those videos where someone puts sand on a speaker and plays certain frequencies and it makes different geometric shapes. You know what I'm referring to? Anyways, so if you're trying to relax or like go to sleep, you put on something like rain noises or bubbling brooks. You don't put on like a dog barking all night. You know what I mean? And it may be a little esoteric. This might be kind of out there, but but sound waves and different types of frequencies and energy do interact with physical matter in ways that can affect the shape of it. And there's even been other research where, like in Japan, I forget the researcher's name, but he played certain affirmations, I guess you could call them, like positive, like I love you type of stuff, on one set of water, and then like I hate you and other terrible noises on another set, and froze the water into crystals, and the shapes that the crystals took on were different based on what frequencies and what, I guess, like affirmations he said. Like I said, this is kind of out there. It's like, I don't know if you believe in that sort of thing or not, but I do. And I think that's the reason why sounds can be used as torture while other sounds can be used therapeutically. And a dog sound is a torturous sound.
Yep. Oh, definitely. I mean, it's an alarm. I mean, it's used as, it's used as a way to draw someone's attention to it. It's sort of, it's like a really primitive burglar alarm, I guess. And we've discussed that on here before. But the problem is, if you bring something like that into a crowded community, it's a complete disaster. It just nothing but a source of problems. And I know, like many people have said too, it's like, when my neighbor's dog was barking, my blood pressure was through the roof. But then when the problem ceased, it went back to normal. Because sounds like that. I mean, this is something maybe you and I could work on this, because I think that dog noise pollution.
I missed that.
Is dog noise pollution is well, there's a couple of things about it. I mean, it definitely has. It's a very it's very toxic. It's incredibly poisonous to people. And it's also, I think, even if you go back and look at this as a social or political issue, I think the number one reason people get into this space, and Johnson, this refers back to what you and I were talking about just now, was that probably, the number one reason people don't like dogs or dog owners or dog culture or dogs in society is the noise pollution. I know, like when I was blogging, and I had a really active blog space for quite a while. I mean, most of the people were there due to dog noise pollution. They get barked out of their house, or they're in a situation like yours or ones that I've had. It's a number one reason. It's really, really bad for the body. And people know that, like, noise pollution is an issue. The dog people know it. Everybody knows it. It's the proverbial elephant in the room. But the thing is, dogs are sacred animals, and I guess everybody just needs to learn to live with this, or not. If it gives, because you're wondering too, it is bad for the body, and you wonder how many premature deaths could be attributed to dog noise pollution.
Right, shortening up your sleep.
Yeah, well, there's that, but like I was talking about, it can, raise blood pressure. How many early onset heart attacks, strokes, kidney failure? Usually that's like if you high blood pressure, they call it the silent killer. So you can say, okay, if barking dog noise or noise like that raises blood pressure, and high blood pressure kills, you can come to the conclusion that barking kills, dog noise pollution kills. how many, people is like tough to say. One aspect of this whole thing is that, it seems like a lot of the focus, or at least the more popular aspects of, say, like our community, the dog culture critique or whatever, focuses on the dog attacks, particularly the really spectacular outcomes where somebody is just totally ripped to pieces. The thing is, and there's a lot of bites, but seriously, I think I'd almost prefer, like, what would I prefer? What would be worse? Having, like, I don't know, a German Shepherd, maybe tear up my leg, or listen to the dog bark for a year. Because at least with a dog attack, now obviously I don't want either to happen, but at least the dog attack, it happens and it's over, and then you heal up. But with the barking, it's just like every day, it's just like this constant, like I said, wearing down, this constant, like, essentially toxin introduced into the environment. I think it would depend on the severity of the dog attack, but I think in a lot of time, barking can be worse.
Yeah, but,
No, I concur.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. That's all I said.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, that hearing the sound, like, spikes your cortisol. You know what I mean? Like, it literally, that's what, and in some cases, spiking your cortisol is a good and useful thing that your body does to, like you said, like, warn you or act as an alarm or, like, move you into, like, motion or whatever. Like, but if it's just constantly raised over a long period of time, like, it will wreak havoc on your physical health.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it triggers a fight or flight response, which is useful because we have, like, we're programmed that way for a reason, right? It's kind of like, when the smoke alarm goes off, you want to get your ass out of the house, right? If there's actually a good reason to do so. But basically what you have is it's an alarm. It's just constantly going off for no good reason. I mean, nothing exceptional. But that's what they claim. Like, that was my ex-neighbor used to claim, well, it's a security dog. It's a burglar alarm. It's like, okay, do you want me to call the cops every time it barks and report a burglary? And I was telling him, it's like, hey, the guy says a burglar alarm. There must be a burglar. I'd be calling the cops every 20 minutes. But that's the thing, is you have these constant alarms going off. And in regards to the dog owners themselves, like, what's wrong with these people? But actually, that might be worth looking into also, like, how do they put up with it? But one thing I found too was with my ex-neighbors, because I don't know if all you folks have heard this, but I've talked about them a few times. And that dog, it was like insane, the amount of noise that dog made. So you think, okay, how did they put up with it? Well, they're just wasted all the time. I would see their recycling bins. Now our county has these big, like, barrels you put their recyclables in, but it used to be they would issue these bins. And I don't know, they're like, 8 to 10 gallons, I guess. And every week they put out at least 3 of them, and they were just overflowing with beer cans and wine bottles. And it was just the 2 of them, and they didn't have parties. It wasn't like they had people over all the time. So it didn't really bother them because they were totally shit-faced. They're completely wasted all the time. But of course, you can't do that either. It's like that's not a solution to the problem,
Well, and that kind of begs that's a chicken and an egg question to me, because all the barking might drive me to the bottle. I don't know.
Yeah.
Could I answer your question?
Sure.
Okay. A while ago, you asked what number of bad outcome of the usual bad outcomes are caused by dog barking. For example, stroke, etc.
Yeah.
I would say it's 100%, at least partly caused by. So it's more instructive to talk about LLEs, which is loss of life expectancy.
Yeah.
So there's various things that cause certain various amounts of loss of life expectancy, such as Bernard L. Cohen is a radiation physicist, and he writes about nuclear power. And so he compares various LLEs to nuclear power, and he shows that eating peanuts is far more dangerous than nuclear power because the LLE count is much higher for peanuts because of the aflatoxin. etc. So that's just an example. So yes, we can look at barking in terms of LLEs, and that would
Yep,
be
yep.
it would be interesting to do a study on that. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. So laws. I mean, I know none of this shit's. It certainly is. It didn't make. It's not going to make me live any longer. There was somebody else brought up. Pursuant to that, was somebody asked on the Discord. How do they sort of attribute deaths to dog attack? If somebody just say somebody's tore up by a dog and they die 2 years later. And I say probably that would not be attributed to the dog attack. It would just be, I don't know, whatever, sepsis, or there was a dog bite related fatality in New Jersey pretty recently. And I didn't see it turn up on dogsbite.org because it was somebody who'd been attacked. They lingered in the hospital for months and finally died. And of course, cause of death was, like I said, sepsis or some kind of complication related to the attack. But because they always try to cover these things up if they can, or frequently do. But yeah, loss of life expectancy due to this, and I'm sure it's huge. I'm sure it's pretty significant. And like talking, or people who turn to alcohol and drugs to escape the noise abuse. But yeah, I mean, but even just the higher cortisol levels, increased blood pressure. That causes a lot of, and these are, autonomous reactions. Like you can't just say, my blood pressure is a little high, I guess I'll just lower it. It doesn't work like that. I mean, there's obviously things you can do to lower your blood pressure, but you can't just it's not like a thermostat. You can't just turn it up and down. And if your neighbor's barky dogs are, causing that, it's like, well, that's just the way it's going to be, until the dogs shut up or somehow you manage to escape the noise. But I imagine, it's, I mean, in terms of like loss of life expectancy, I guess measured in years, how many years of life are lost due to this? I mean, it's not zero, that's for sure.
Right.
I don't know how, I mean, that would be great to have. I don't know how a study like that would be performed, though. Like, how would you actually gather that information?
I had a thought. I don't know. This might be dumb. I'm not a researcher, but like, what if you looked at places where the number of dogs to human is like the ratio is very low? You know what I mean? Versus a high
Yeah.
ratio, and then just looked at the average life expectancy of those locations. I don't know. It's maybe not the best, but I was just thinking,
Yeah.
there's certain populations where they're like, oh, they eat a lot of fish, so they live really long. But what if it's just because there's like no dogs there on that Japanese island or something? You know what I mean? How do you actually know it's the fish? Like, I don't know.
You'd have
that's
to,
called
like,
epidemiology.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's called epidemiology. Epidemiology.
You'd have to find like two, like for your samples, you'd need, populations that were the same otherwise, right? So you'd have to basically eliminate everything else as a fact. You'd have to essentially isolate the dogs, or at least in this case, like the dog noise pollution, as a factor, and say, okay, this is a difference. It's like, it knocks 5 years off everybody's life on average.
Or you can look at individual nations or population areas longitudinally, and then see what happened over time. What changed?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so you might be able to find some areas that had very few dogs and then a lot of dogs, and then see what happened to their health.
Yeah, I'm sure people would probably argue that wasn't it. I mean, it's the funny thing is, one of their narrative assertions is that the dogs make people live longer. And I don't know, like, what planet is that on? One of the jokes I used to make is they would argue that, dogs lower blood pressure. Well, I guess is technically true because, like, for example, all these people killed in dog attacks, their blood pressure is now 0. It can't get any lower than that, right?
Or the ones that have rearranged their face,
Yeah.
I'm sure their
That's-
blood pressure is quite low now too.
Yeah, probably. I think, well, like Jacqueline Durand lost 30% of the blood in her body. I'm sure that brought her blood pressure way down,
Way
at least
down.
temporarily. It's not a good way. Like, ripping out somebody's femoral artery is probably not the best way to lower their blood pressure, though. I'm thinking.
Are you sure? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a medical
eat your jugular
person, but
vein that bad.
yeah, I'm not giving medical advice, but I'm thinking, yeah, like probably, yeah, like tearing out your jugular, your femoral artery, it's probably not conducive to good outcomes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
Which brings
I
the
think you're not
conclusion-
trying to lower the blood pressure. You're just trying to get it into the proper range.
Well, right. Yeah. Yeah, well, right.
God, I love it.
There's like a bracket there, but that's a really interesting point, though. But that's yeah, but having a barking dog in the vicinity is not going to increase anyone's life expectancy. But even if you just look at it, like even if you just sort of step back from the actual like physical bad outcomes, it's like, as a social or political issue, I would say the number one reason people get into this space is dog noise pollution because it's so prevalent. Like the really bad outcomes, like your probability of being, totally dismembered by neighborhood dogs really isn't that high relative. I mean, the only good number for something like that is 0, but you compare that to probably millions of people are having their mental and physical health degraded by dog noise pollution. It's crazy. And the other thing to consider too, if it were anything else doing this, if it were another pet or anything else, it would be contemplated completely differently. The authorities would get involved. It's a really big problem that doesn't get enough attention, even by people in our space. But that would be interesting to, well, actually, study not just the effects of the noise, but the nature of it itself, like the decibel levels, the frequency, the pitch, and what that does. Like Sheepie was just saying, like different noises clearly have measurable physical effects on things. That's documented. Also, most people don't understand the decibel scale too well because the sound, it's not linear, right? So it's logarithmic. So if you look at it as the sound goes up, it doesn't go up in a diagonal line. It's like this big, like, almost like I don't know if parabola is the right word, but it just like shoots up. So the thing is, I believe it's every 3 decibels, the sound energy doubles. Not necessarily audible volume, but the sound energy, which is why when you get up into the higher ranges, where like you get up into like 80, 90, 100 decibels, that's loud, and that sound carries a long way.
What is the average decibel level of like a large or like a medium to large dog barking? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah,
I have to look it up.
I think I've done a lot of research on that, and the numbers are all over the place. And what's interesting is that well, to answer your question, I think it depends. It depends on the dog breed and the individual dog. It can go anywhere from about 80 to about maybe 115 decibels. So I think the average is a little over 100, maybe like 105 for like say a lab. They can go loud, and that's really, really loud. That's, and I could, vouch for that, just my own experience. Like the dog that used to live, the ex-neighbors across the street, I could walk to the end of the block, which is in excess of 300 meters, and I could hear them like loud and clear. That's how, that is loud. That's just, I mean, that's loud enough if you're in close proximity to damage your hearing. That's really loud. But like I said, the numbers, it depends on the breeds. And what's interesting too is if you, maybe I'll share something real quick. I guess you folks can still see the screen. There is this website, and actually he was acquainted with the author. I don't know what happened to him. It's called barkingdogs.net. And let me see if I can find this. There's a lot of good information on here. One of these in here is, let me see if I can find. No, that didn't work. Somewhere in here, there's a list of nuisance barkers by breed, just like, when they rank dogs by dog bite related fatalities, like pit bulls are the worst and Rottweilers the second worst, and out of 3 is like Akitas or whatever. There's actually where is that? Quieting, silencing, turning to the law, noise activist guide, politics and noise, impact on people, biting, barking a dog news, maybe in here. Was it infamy award, links to other sites? It's in here someplace. Barking dogs Facebook. What you can do. Why is your dog barking? Somewhere in this site, there's actually a list of dog breeds and how likely they are, by breed to bark inappropriately, right? I want to find this. Just bear with me. It's in here someplace. Quieting your own barking dog, turning to the law for help, chronic barking, why trainability, chronic. Oh, list of this is it. Okay. I think I'm going to put this in the the about section of the video. So the worst breeds, actually at the top, these are the least bad, at least statistically, right? Similar to dog bite related fatality. So the least bad are like Bloodhound, Golden Retriever, Newfoundland, Akita. Those are the least bad, at least statistically. The worst are, here we got Yorkshire Terrier. Yeah, there's a little bark bag for you. Miniature Schnauzer, Beagle. Yeah, Beagle. Actually, I have a neighbor about a block and a half away with a Beagle, and it's far enough away it doesn't really bother me. But when that thing is outside, you can really hear them. So it's kind of like talk about BSL. They want to ban dogs by breed based on the dog bite statistics. Maybe we should do the same thing. Maybe we should just see these. We'll just start here with the worst. We'll just ban these. Nobody can have them. They're too noisy. Forget about writing barking tickets, right?
Yeah, I don't know about that one. It seems like the ones that, and I'll have to concur with Joe, and I miss you, Joe. All dogs are assholes. I concur with his quote. I say it's the German Shepherd. That seems to be the one in this neighborhood. I've narrowed it down to the number one asshole. And I'm going to be writing a very long, poignant letter to animal control about doing their jobs, about shutting his dog the fuck up. Because what he'll do is it'll be completely quiet, and he will break the silence by barking and barking and barking until other dogs start barking, and then he'll shut the fuck up.
Yeah, they set each other off. Yep. So now you've got a whole.
And then he's an ass, and I've really got to do something about him.
Yeah. Well, this is just based on, this list is based on, it's statistics, basically, kind of like dog bite related fatalities. Like, I guess pit bulls are the worst. They're the worst that are popular anyway, but that doesn't mean any dog can bite you or even kill you. So, yeah, that's terrible. One thing you can do too, as you're talking about remedies, is, you can sue for private nuisance also. You predict the authorities won't do anything because, they're violating your right to private use of your space.
Well, after 7:30, you're supposed to call emergency services, but do you know how corny that sounds?
Well, what you can do is, one way, one tactic is to just say, oh, you're concerned about the dog. Oh, poor Fido's tied up outside by himself. He's being neglected.
That's another approach.
Crazy.
I didn't think of that one. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I wrote, talking about, writing letters was one of my most popular blogs was the letter I wrote to my ex-neighbor across the street about the barking. And, it was a formal desist letter. I was going to send one to these neighbors, but I held back on it because I wanted to see if the problem recurred. Me, screaming at the guy. I talk about results. I got results. It seems like it's been, I heard shortly thereafter, I heard some barking, but I'm pretty sure, about 90% sure, they got rid of him, the dog, because I have not seen or heard him. And actually, just thinking about that, it's like my whole body, it's relaxing. I'm thinking, I don't have to worry about it anymore, because it does. I think the term is catharsis. You almost want to cry with, relief. But in any case, yeah, one of the most popular blogs was that desist letter. In fact, that blog got over 36,000 reads. And that shows you, what, and of course, I'm like nobody. I'm not, CNN.com or anything like that, right? I'm basically nobody. But that kind of, went viral in a sense. And interestingly, it wasn't even written as a blog. It was a desist letter to them. I wrote it before I started blogging. I said, yeah, maybe I'll post this desist letter. And it, got a lot of attention. But it'd be interesting, to delve into, the science of sound. It's a very, very interesting topic. Talking about folks, Sheepie, one of my blog commenters, he was an electrical engineer from Australia. And a retired guy. I think he's passed away now. But he one of his specialties were things like, sound and speaker systems. So he had a really good, he could come on. I think I said he's passed away, but he could, jump into one of these conversations and give a really good technical explanation of how sound works, because a lot of people don't understand it, like, say, the decibel scale. So
Yeah, that would have been really interesting to have a conversation about that. It's one of my kind of interests, and I'm now thinking I should design a speaker system directing certain frequencies towards them, but I don't know. That might be a topic for another day now.
Yeah, well, I know people have done that. There was some discussion on the Discord about you can buy commercial devices that are they're bark activated, and they'll, create that high frequency noise that humans can't hear it, but dogs can. Apparently, it's kind of like barking is to us. It's very painful to them to listen to. So the idea is basically you're training your neighbor's dogs not to bark. The problem is most of those devices are, junk. We were actually looking at one on the Discord. We were having this conversation. I think Jones and I were talking about this because he was considering doing something like that in response to his neighbor's barking dog. And I said, yeah, those commercial devices are basically junk. And I think one reason for that is that a device of sufficient power to actually deter the dog would be considered to be, quote, animal cruelty, if that makes any sense. You can't you're making Fido suffer. Well, Fido makes me suffer. I'm going to make him suffer. But you could, design a device like that, and it might be sound activated or even just manually activated. Say, tie it in, say, to a key fob with Bluetooth, for example. So every time you hear the dogs bark, you just, boom, give it a blast. But I'm thinking if you'd have to, you need a couple of things. Again, I'm not the electrical engineer. I have a little bit of an electrical engineering background, but not with this sort of thing. But you need specialty speakers, because a typical boombox speaker, I don't think could generate sound at that frequency range. Maybe I'm wrong. But typically, if you buy like a commercial stereo, they're not going to design a speaker system to produce sound at a frequency you can't hear. So you probably need
Yeah.
a specialty speaker, and you'd need something with a lot of energy behind it. I mean, because these commercial devices, because Jones and I were looking at it, and this one, it was powered with a 9-volt battery. And now I forget. So I think your typical like 9-volt battery has something like a half an amp hour, I believe. It's like 500 like milliamp hours. So I'm thinking, okay, so the whole thing, the capacity is what's about 4.5 watt hours total output, until it's dead, give or take. So I'm thinking, yeah, that thing probably can't produce more than a watt of output, if that even. So, but if you could design something, even say like with 100 watts, particularly given the distance, that might deter these dogs from barking. So you basically be training them not to bark. So every time they tone up, you give them a blast. The problem with that too is that might affect your other animals, like I don't know if sheep can hear that. You might want to
Yeah, I'm
look into
actually
that.
not sure about. I'm not really sure about that regarding the sheep. And the other thing is whether even if you can't hear it, like I don't know, is it affecting you in some way too? Even you know what I mean? It might be
Yeah.
beyond the
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
physical ability to hear it, but it is still like a
Yeah,
frequency, like traveling
yeah.
around
Well, I
you.
guess
Like, I don't
there's a trade-off, because if you can, hopefully, if it works as intended, you won't need to use it forever. Or as time goes on, you would need to use it less and less as the dogs have been essentially, trained out of barking, while you're using this device. So, hopefully, I mean, you might need to occasionally use it, but it's sort of a trade-off. It's like, okay, you've got endless barking. The trade-off between that versus like whatever the downsides are of the noises produced by this, homemade device you have. And maybe that's another reason that the commercial devices are so weak, because they don't want to, because technically it's noise polluting. The thing is, fortunately, you're not likely to get caught, because they're not going to hear it. They don't know. The human owners, I mean. So normally, the advice in this space is to like not start a noise war, mainly because, well, again, the barky dogs have, the dog owner has superior standing to you. Right, they have way more leeway in noise polluting than say you would. Like, say if you got a pair, that's why I said tell Joe. I said, well, how about you just get a pair of refrigerator-sized speakers and listen to AC/DC at 2 a.m. But the problem with that is that the police will respond to that. You might get cited for that. So you got to
know.
be careful. Oh,
It's like
sorry.
dog barking is treated almost like a natural sound or something. Like it's
Yeah.
just part of the environment. You know what I mean? Like whereas you are generating the noise with your speakers.
Yeah.
It's not fair because like the dog constantly barking is treated like that's just what dogs
All
do.
right.
It's just a background sound that you have to deal with. It's not the owner's fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's like as if you live next to a stream and you just hear the sound of water all the time or something.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's what they want people to think, but it's not a natural sound. One, because, okay, I'm getting some background noise. I'm gonna, let's see.
That was
Okay.
me. I muted myself.
Okay. The yeah, they treat it like it's a natural sound, but it's not. That's what we're led to believe. But first of all, dogs are domestic animals, are not part of nature, right? And the dog owner brings the dog into the community. So it is per se noise pollution. And the dog owner is accountable for it. They just like, if a dog attacks somebody, the owner, like we were just discussing earlier, I mean, you can blame the dog for being the, nasty ass crap hound that it is, but you also blame the owner for enabling him. Because if the owner hadn't brought the dogs into the neighborhood, you wouldn't have these outcomes. So it's definitely noise pollution. Yeah, it's not like they want to treat it like it's a thunderstorm or something like that, but nobody is causing thunderstorms to happen. Maybe unless you maybe some very indirect way if you talk about climate change. But you know what? Yeah, we've had thunderstorms before humans were on Earth, and we're going to have them after. So that's a natural sound. But yeah, dogs barking or not. So so you can say, yeah, just say no. That's wrong. It's it is per se noise pollution.
So I was thinking, maybe bass would require a lot of power, but maybe higher frequency treble. Doesn't take as much for the same volume. Because like when you blow on a dog whistle, it's pretty loud to the dog, probably. I mean, given a regular whistle.
That's a good thought. I mean, maybe you're right, but most people say though that there's if you go to Amazon, look that up, like anti-barking, sonic device. Most of those have terrible ratings. And they have terrible ratings because they don't produce results. And I think probably just because they don't have a lot of energy. Maybe you're right though. I mean, maybe you don't need like a ton of output. But
or maybe a whistle is just more efficient.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it, like how much energy, if you blow a whistle for 5 seconds, how much energy is emitted there? How much sound energy? So you could probably measure.
I'm thinking you could like connect like a fan up to a whistle, and it probably won't take up that much power.
Yeah. You could, or an air compressor. That's what you would do. Yeah, an air compressor. Yeah, make it be like a train whistle, except higher range.
That would be amazing.
That would be like pull that like you could do that too. Like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be electronic.
It could be controlled electronically still, so that that it's automated.
Like a solenoid to actuate the release of the air. Yeah, you hook it up to
and you could use a flow regulator to make sure that it's always the same amount of pressure, so that it's not like.
Though, is like, how do you know? This would be true for the electronic devices also. How do you know it's working if you can't hear it?
You use another device that can detect the frequency.
Yeah. Or to see how the dogs react. Take your dog whistle, hook it up to an air compressor, just, by hand, see what they do, see what happens.
That is far more noise than you could. Oh, you know what? If this could destroy a dog's ears, then they wouldn't be able to hear anything to bark at.
Well, maybe you wouldn't want to make it that way, but
I don't know how much. I don't know what compressed air would end up doing to a dog's ears. And actually, although we can't hear it, it might cause a problem for humans too.
Well, we were just talking about that. It might affect
the frequency.
Us or animals. Well, probably a thing to do is you would start small and work your way up.
Yeah.
Right. So you would start with, like, if using your air compressor, you'd probably start with low pressure first. Or same thing if you had an electronic device, you could, you'd have a volume control. So you'd start at low volume and, work your way up. So if you like on the tens, talk about crank it up. If a 1 gets you the results you want, well, great. You don't need to, but if it doesn't, then try it at a 2. And if that doesn't work, you go to 3. I wouldn't start at like full volume because you don't know what that's. I mean, it might just break every window in your house. You don't really know what's going to happen.
And you would want to put a flow regulator on it so that you can consistently get that same pressure.
Yep.
Adjustable flow regulator.
Yeah. But yeah,
because you don't want to use up your whole tank.
Well, hopefully the thing is, you don't have to run it. You shouldn't have to run it all the time. Like,
sure, I'm saying like in response to an animal, but still, you don't want to have your air compressor running as often because you had it running. You had the whistle louder than it needed to be.
Yeah, well, that's just it. Yeah, you want to take, like I said, a minimalist approach. Like start at a low volume and work your way up. Because yeah, if if it's set at a 1 that gets the result you want, well, fine, great. Then don't start at the max setting and work your way down. But like we were talking about before too, yeah, something like that could have bad effects on humans or other animals. But again, but like I said, there's always trade-offs, right? So you got to balance that against a lifetime of, barking dog torment, particularly because of the idea is that the thought behind these devices is that you shouldn't have to use them all the time, because what happens is the dog associates, you're training them out of barking. So the dog starts barking, the device goes off, it hurts their ears, so they stop. So they start to associate their barking with this really obnoxious noise. And so it trains them out of barking. Same with the anti-barking collars work. Like they start barking, the collar gives them a jolt, so they get trained out of it. So it's not constantly shocking them, or it shouldn't have to. Maybe you get a dog that's really stupid, or is just such a recalcitrant or defiant, barker, they'll just keep doing it. Same thing with, the way the electric fences work or invisible fences. It's like once they get jolted a few times, they're not going to keep throwing themselves at the fence. And this sort of works, or at least in theory, this works the same way. You're training them out of barking so they bark less, so you don't need the device. If not at all, at least not as much. That's the thinking behind it. So the fun never stops. Hey, folks, we're coming up on an hour and a half. I think we covered everything I wanted to cover. Did anybody else have another topic? Maybe we could stay on for another 10 minutes. Did anybody else have another topic they wanted to cover?
I'm pretty well stuck on that topic myself, because it seems like a fun microcontroller project to do.
Yeah, well, you try it. Your brother's got barking dog issues. You could try it out on
Ooh,
his
perfect.
dog. Yeah. But anyway, let's move off of that for now. Did anybody else have anything else they wanted to discuss? Going once? Going twice?
The only other thing that has kind of happened to me recently regarding this topic is just, we mentioned it briefly, but the Law and Order idea of so I had this friend who brought up his troubles of online dating because there are so many pit mommies, I guess. I've never been, fortunately, I'm thankful. I've never had to, use any of these online dating apps. So I'm not super familiar with it, but he was sending some screenshots the past several weeks of, I guess girls profiles who their picture is them with a pit bull or kissing a dog or things like that. Yeah. And so I thought, we were kind of opening the topic of dogs in general. And so I just started saying not even with just dating, but imagine, because some of these images had children too, they're single moms and stuff. And I'm just poor kid, and I just started sharing some different stories about, dogs who have attacked or killed children or other people, and just dogs as a danger in general. And I guess it didn't go over very well. And a mutual friend then contacted me after this and was like, hey, you need to chill with this dog hate stuff. And I'm just like, what? It just really took me off guard, because this guy doesn't even have a dog either. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It was just kind of a real poignant moment for me, where I was like, okay, I know we talk about how this is kind of a religious belief system these people have, but it's even more than I realized, I guess. It's just a taboo, like a total taboo to even question like whether or not people should own dogs.
Yep. Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
that was my only
Yeah,
other.
that's interesting. Actually, it raises. I became. I was introduced to a new topic the other day. It was before I gave myself the timeout. It's called dog fishing. And a dog fisher is somebody who does not have a dog, somebody pursuing online romance. They don't have a dog, but what they do is they get their profile pictures taken with somebody else's dog, because everybody thinks that having a dog in your dating profile is going to make you more attractive. But as we've noted, it's like not really, even in fact, even a lot of dog people don't want other dog people in their life. But I thought that was interesting, dog fishing. But I think it's what it is that people, we've all been conditioned to, love and respect these things. When somebody comes out and says, yeah, maybe, dogs aren't the greatest thing in creation, maybe they're not all perfect fur angels sent from heaven, they, you get that reaction of like, no, you're wrong. Stop with the hate. But a lot of it too, it's not even about hating them. I mean, I get the hate, accusation all the time. Even back when I first started blogging, I said, look, I just want dog owners to be held accountable. Like, where's the hate? Like, that's not hateful. It's very democratic. But the thing is, if you don't put the thing if you don't literally worship them and put them on a pedestal, you're a hater. But I think, we need to defeat that notion too, because that's their framing. But you could just say in response, it's like, look, having some reasonable concerns, about these things, is not hateful. Hate is like, yeah, man, I want to throw them all into a vat of acid. I want to, toss them into wood chippers. I want to burn them alive. I despise them with a passion. That's hatred. And the other thing I had to consider too is, even if somebody does hate them, if you do feel that way, like I said, many people have very real, very personal, very rational reasons for hating these things and the culture that surrounds them. It's not, a rational hatred is you just hate something in the abstract. But this isn't abstract for a lot of people, like your situation.
Well, and it was a weirdly hypocritical stance to take, in my opinion, because I live in a fairly red state, you could say, and so I'm acquainted with people who have certain political views that could be considered hateful by others. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whether or not I agree, but and I don't know. It was just weird because people take really hardline stances on certain things involving actual human beings, but then get really offended that I have similar hardline stances on like dogs. That just struck me as very odd and demonstrative of the level of kind of indoctrination that we're dealing with, I guess.
Yeah, it's canine supremacy. But I think it's the other thing too, as you talk about the politics of this. I mean, this is a really basic law and order issue here. Particularly, it goes back to like the whole service dog thing. It's like, it should be a permitted activity. They should not just be allowed to just, trample local laws and the association rights and self-rule rights of everyone else. Dog attacks, they say, well, if that had occurred any other way, all these law and order people be like, yeah, send him to the electric chair. But if a dog kills somebody, they're like, it's just an accident.
Right. Yeah,
it's just an accident. You can't, send somebody to prison for something the dog did. And my response is, hold my beer, because it was done any other way. I emphasize this. There's a lot of big legal double standards here that, protect dogs and dog owners specifically, whether it's, black letter law or just sort of unwritten policy. Like, for example, I mean, you always hear, I've done vlogs about this, where what happens when the family pet kills a kid? Well, it depends. If the pet is not a dog, the parents or the guardians go to prison. But if it is a dog, it's like, oh, those poor people. Yeah, not only did their kids die, but the dogs had to be put down also. Like, let's start a GoFundMe and, raise $500,000. That's the reaction. But people, too, as any, honest law and order person would, should at least concede that, yeah, there's a, a law and order issue here. These people should not just be allowed to spread chaos everywhere they go. It's totally uncivilized, but yet they are.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It was a weird experience, I guess, like for me, to hear that from someone. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was
I don't
it
think
was a weird experience.
Maybe, too, it's like, when I presented, I presented as, a law and order issue. Where I say, like, look, these, in particular, talk about, right wingers or red state people. It's like, at least the social conservatives, should be supposedly, they're big on, responsibility, personal accountability, law and order. So, getting a lid on this dog chaos should fit with that ideology. I mean, if you're just some complete wacko anarchist, that's one thing. But you can appeal to those people and say, look, there's a law. Forget about being in the country. 'Cause that's what they do. They get the barking dogs, loose dogs. Well, one of the arguments they use, they say, well, it's it's a property rights type argument. When you talk about, like, say, right-leaning dog foamers, they use two arguments. They use, usually it's self-defense and property rights. And I would tell them, I'd say, look, and I'm a property rights guy also, but the thing with property rights is like every other right, everybody has them, not just the dog owners, right? So if they say, like, well, that's we'll talk about, say, shooting at large or trespassing dogs. They're like, no, that's my property. You can't, take my property away. And I'd say, well, okay, what is your property doing on my property, trying to gnaw my leg off? Like how do you, like, interpret that scenario? And it's like, if you want me to respect your property rights, you need to respect mine, which means you need to keep your dog violence, your dog waste, and your dog noise to your space where it belongs, okay? And keep it out of mine. A lot of that's what we're trying to assert. Like with what you're going through, or anybody else in the call has had a barking dog issue, is they're violating your property rights. They're controlling the noise level in your space and not you. That's, what I told mine in this letter. I say, like, look, I have a right to peaceful use of my space because it's space that I pay for and I maintain and so forth. Okay, and I don't want it constantly awash in the sound of your barking dogs. I want my rights back. So, and that's a way to appeal to those people, because they say, yeah, it's totally hypocritical for the dog people to use a property rights argument when they don't respect anyone else's property rights.
Right. This one took a weird turn because he ended up comparing it to gun control, which, as you can imagine, most, right wingers are opposed to. So me trying to, like, regulate even, like, dog ownership in any way would be like taking people's guns away or something like that.
Yeah, that's another. Well, that's what they say. Well, again, they're using a property rights argument. They say, yeah, today it's pit bulls, and tomorrow they're coming after your guns and your cars and your air conditioners and all that kind of stuff. It's like, no, again, it's only dogs that get that argument. Like, for example, like if I say, okay, the largest cat I can have without a big pile of special permits is 20 pounds. Where's the property rights argument there? Why isn't that communism? Why isn't that the same as like, say, gun confiscation or forcing everybody to drive electric cars. Well, it's not, because dogs are special, right? They're above all that, because typically, I mean, with the exception of dogs, everybody respects the fact that, at least in crowded communities, that the keeping of animals, can be restricted. Like, nobody says, like, can I have a pet giraffe in my downtown apartment? And everybody, like, if you were to ask anybody that of any political background, to be like, no, that's insane. Well, how about 20 pit bulls? Oh, that's fine. You can't restrict that. You can't restrict that. That would be communism or fascism or Nazism, or however they want to express it.
Right, exactly. It's weird because dogs turn into this amorphous, like, I don't know, it shows that the issue goes beyond like political or anything, because both sides come up with these really contrived arguments for why you can't regulate dogs.
Yep. Yep.
It was really, I don't know, it was just a really weird thing for me
And
to
it's not
see.
even, it's like there's a keeping of them, right? Because that's what I don't know if I was the first person to make this argument, but because then they're saying it was actually one of the previous attempts to repeal Miami's pit bull ban. Everybody came out of the woodwork. Usually, often they use, like, I guess what you would call nominally left-leaning arguments, like, well, it's racist and bigoted and fascist, and they always throw, like, the Constitution in there. It's like unconstitutional. And I say, well, I can't have pigs in my suburban backyard. So what's the constitutionality of that? And nobody argues that. They're like, yeah, pigs in a neighborhood are a bad idea. But a bunch of dogs the same size, oh, yeah, that's perfectly fine. But why is nobody arguing, like, yeah, what's the constitutionality of these farm animal restrictions, exotic pet restrictions, cat restrictions? Why is the Constitution ever brought into those? It's because, yeah, people realize that you're really keeping any animal as a privilege. But it's not just the keeping of them, it's even the control or the use of them. Because it's not even so much that they argue that it's okay to keep these things, but they can just do whatever they want with no restraint. They can noise pollute, assault people in an aggravated manner, cause all kinds of other problems, and that's good too. Like, example, if you use, like, the gun debate or the gun issue, and that's a completely different dynamic in a lot of ways and a lot of levels. But even your biggest gun person is going to, if you ask them, okay, do you own every bullet that comes out of that gun? They're going to say, absolutely. Well, what happens if your Rottweiler busts out and, deletes a pizza delivery guy? They're going to say, oh, that's just an accident. But really, how are those two things, on a fundamental level, they're really not that different, right? I mean, those two things, like an accidental shooting, would be, particularly if somebody dies, it could be treated, as a negligent homicide. Why aren't dog attacks treated the same way?
Yeah, that's a really interesting, and I'm trying to better organize or form my thoughts around this, but in this particular interaction, it was almost like dogs biting people was a foregone conclusion. Like, I'm serious. Like, I don't know how better to phrase it. Like, I don't know if he consciously was aware that that's what he's implying, but it was like, because the whole thing started with the pit mommies, and like, he's, I guess, maybe kind of more like along an ADEP sort of train of thought here, but if it's okay to talk about banning certain dogs only because they're dangerous, but it would be unfair to ban, his example was like to ban dogs in general because some golden retriever might get Alzheimer's and bite someone someday. And in
Yeah.
that case, it wouldn't be the golden retriever's fault because they're good boys, and this one just happened to go crazy because of Alzheimer's or something. Like, it was just a
Yeah.
weird, it was like just a weird mental gymnastics to like make dogs good.
Yeah.
And like the fact that people get bit by dogs is not their fault. It's just kind of like barking is just a natural sound, and dogs
Yeah.
biting people is just a natural occurrence. So trying to regulate that away would be like taking people's rights away to own it would be like taking people's rights away or something.
Well, a
It was
lot of
just
it, I
so
mean, you don't
weird. I
need to
didn't know how to respond
necessarily,
to that.
it's not even necessarily ban them, but just like, I mean, my narrative was like, let's just hold them accountable like everybody else. Let's just do that, because I think, and obviously that wouldn't be a perfect solution, but I think in part of, where I'm coming from, I think a lot of people are here coming from, it's sort of a position of or perspective of, justice, like victims advocacy. Because you could say, okay, I mean, it's not necessarily hypocritical to say that, I mean, in my opinion, it's like, okay, pit bulls are so dangerous, they just need to be gone, like nobody can have them at all. But that doesn't mean that it necessarily get every other dog and dog owner off the hook. You could say, okay, there needs to be, some because right now there's no accountability in most cases. So say, okay, with the rest of them, we're going to, hold them accountable. But you can't do that either, because like you said, you can't blame somebody for something that just kind of happens. Or not just that, or they, blame the victim. It's like they screwed up somehow. Though it seems like the narrative has kind of shifted. It used to be just a avalanche of victim blaming. But you're right. Now it seems that it's shifted. It's just, yeah, being barked at all the time, or, being mauled by your neighbor's Rottweilers. It's just life. It's
just part and parcel of living
It's-
in society. Like,
yeah, it's just it's like almost like a tax or something.
yeah. It was weird too, because in this example, it was almost like he was implying that the dog, the hypothetical golden retriever with Alzheimer's that bites someone someday, is the victim. Like, he's a good boy and you're victimizing him by blaming him for biting someone, or I don't know. It was just like I
I
said,
don't
it was
know.
just weird. It's
I think he's using it. That's a very unusual case where maybe the dog has a brain tumor or some kind of degenerative brain disease that's causing it to act that way. But that's probably 0.1% of dog bites, if that. I mean, most of the time, dogs have inbred aggression. I mean, I think they act the way they do, due to mostly inbred traits. Inbred traits, and probably environment has something to do with it also. The way they're kept. Like, I've observed border collies behaving aggressively. I've had at least a couple of them try to take a chunk out of me. And normally those aren't, classified or qualified as dangerous dogs. But, if you keep it in a way that's really counter to, the dog's inbred environment, they're herding dogs, right? They they should be on a farm running all day, not cooped up in some small apartment. So I think that can make them more aggressive also. So it's like, it's primarily you're dealing with, genetics. And perhaps, the way that the dog is kept is a factor also. I mean, it's the owner's responsibility in either case. Part of the thing is, if you start holding owners accountable, then dogs become very difficult to own.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line right there. Like,
Yeah.
you nailed it. That's really what, and I think at some level people realize that. I don't know, like, they realize that they probably shouldn't own a dog, but they want to, so they just ignore all of the signs that they shouldn't. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're kind of sold, to the public in a very, disingenuous way. We're talking about like ADEPs, one of their, pet peeves is, because the pit propagandists, say, oh, they're nanny dogs, they're great with kids. They're just misunderstood. But those same people, right, these owners of other breeds, they lie about the nature of dog ownership also. They say, oh, yeah, that dog, get a dog or 5, he's just a totally carefree best friend. And that's a lie. So that's the thing is like, don't lie about the nature of dog ownership, but then, get pissed at the pit people because they're lying about the nature of their dogs. I mean, lying like that is, it's not necessarily a pit nutter trait. It's a dog nutter trait. Maybe the pit nutters are worse, but all dog people, they all use the same excuses.
Right. I think it's just more apparent with pit nutters because they are literally trying to own a dog that's a fighting dog. Like,
Yep.
so it becomes obvious. Like all of the downsides of dog ownerships are just amplified with when it comes
Yep.
to like a pit bull. But yeah, like it doesn't mean that those downsides don't exist with other breeds. They
Oh,
do.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like a pit bull is like an amplified example of that,
Yeah. It's a super mutt. It's a mega murder mutt. But as as you talk to these people, it's like, and you could figure out like where, in terms of like allowing dogs in society, even when I still have up on this screen, it's like, okay, what's a good way to address the barking dog issue? Do we hold dog owners accountable, or do we just, start at the bottom of this list and just start working our way up? Right. So like what's a better way to, address it? Because I think you could argue it's like, okay, where do you draw the line at what's legal to own? And it's a good conversation to have. But I think it really, aside from that, though, it's like, okay, dog owners desperately need to be held accountable, just like everybody else is. And, it's not a hateful thing. It's like, look, if you want to live in a society, you're tacitly or at least passively agreeing to be held accountable. And if dog owners can't be held accountable, then I guess dogs can't be owned.
Right. Yeah.
But, present it that way, particularly if you're, communicating with, right-leaning people, is, present it in that way. It's like, look, this is a law and order issue that we have because you have this, arbitrarily defined group of people, dog owners, may not never, but they're very rarely held accountable. Like, are you okay with that? Right? Because again, they could say, well, they didn't actually commit the deed themselves. It's like, no. They brought the dog into the community. They failed to control it. They have culpability, period. You can easily connect those dots. They can't just say, oh, I had nothing to do with it. They had plenty to do with it. Even if the dog never showed aggression before, they can't say they had nothing to do with it. It's like, no, they have culpability. It's like, and you know what? Yeah, again, like I just said, if you can't be held accountable for what your pet does, then you shouldn't have it. It's part of the trade-off. It's like, okay, you want to own a Rottweiler. It's like, that's a lot of dog. That can get you into trouble.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way to frame it.
Yeah.
I wish I could go back into that argument I was having and say
well,
that.
I think that's a good way to frame it. Talking to like left-leaning people about this, because you're right, like where you are, probably, I would assume that, at least most of these, dog, foamers out there probably are GOP. But if you go into, say, an urban area, like the pit mommy with the dog mom t-shirt, probably Democrat or left-leaning. I don't know how you present the debate to them. Maybe they may law, present as a law and order issue also, but but it's like I said, it's a really basic law and order issue. Just present it that way, and it's like, okay, what's hateful about holding people accountable? I don't see the hatred. We hold drunk drivers accountable. Why not these people? So, anywho, like I said, we're coming up on 2 hours, and I think my voice is starting to go. I think I'm going to close it out. So yeah, we're 1:55. So in any case, thanks folks for joining. This is Animal Uncontrol, and as always, people first.